Hey, welcome back, everyone. I hope you guys have been enjoying yourselves. I know that it has been a long time, unfortunately, since I came in and produced the next episode for the book read that we're doing. Life has been just crazy chaotic lately with starting a couple new jobs and just trying to find my footing there with wedding planning and a bunch of other shit that comes with living life. So, for those that have been waiting for this episode and the next one to come out, or the next chapters rather to come out, my apologies on that. And to my subscribers that have been waiting, again, my apologies, but hopefully give you some good material here as we make this video, make the next video, and get back on track. So, if you're someone seeing this video and you're like, who the heck is this guy and why is he in this room and what's the deal with the books back there and all that good stuff, my name's Nick Leitch. I'm the creator of the Life with Nick YouTube channel and the host of the Life with Nick podcast. I'm not going to go into full detail as to like who I am, what this is all about. However, I would strongly encourage you to go over to my intro on my page, and it's about a 10-minute video. It gives you a whole kind of overview of what I'm about, what I'm trying to accomplish, all of that good stuff. So for those that do know what's going on, we just wrapped up chapter 9 in our book of the month, which is Psycho-Cybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. Chapter 8 and 9 were about specific personality traits that can help us either be more successful or help us prevent failure type personalities. So this book has been quite a journey in terms of what we've covered, a little bit on self-image, a little bit on our servo mechanisms, a little bit on personality, a little bit on what makes a personality, emotional traps, emotional pains, really just kind of everything to the human experience as far as who we're trying to be, who we're trying to heal, how we're trying to heal, and all that good stuff. So today, in this specific chapter, we are going to be diving into chapter 10. And chapter 10 is labeled How to Remove Emotional Scars and How to Give Ourselves an Emotional Facelift. So, in conjunction with other things that we've talked about, we're going to essentially be like flying the plane in the general direction of Psycho-Cybernetics as a whole. But this chapter will be a quick detour into what even is emotional pain, what are emotional wounds, why would someone need an emotional facelift, and all that good stuff. So, for those that have done the reading, I greatly appreciate it. And for those who have not but are checking out this content to kind of get an idea of what the heck chapter 10 is all about, I appreciate you, and we are going to dive in. So this is my interpretation of chapter 10. So when we receive a physical injury from our body essentially forms scar tissue. The scar tissue is thicker and tougher than the original flesh, as it's written in the book. And the purpose of that scar tissue is to essentially add this protective layer from us going back in the world and not kind of damaging that area, if you will. Moving from that physical injury to emotional injury, we're inclined to do very much of the same thing, right? If we are going to naturally assume that our body heals us by building this scar tissue from physical injury, we would imagine our body does the same thing in recovering from emotional pain. So really quick, like what is emotional pain, right? I'm just kind of throwing that out and people are like, maybe I know what this is, Nick. Maybe I don't know what this is, Nick, but this is kind of my, couple definitions here. So potentially in childhood, getting bullied for something, whether that is, being overweight or having glasses or having acne, being too tall, being too short, in middle school and high school, there's just an array of things that we can be made fun of. So that's one thing. Failing our own expectations can cause emotional pain. Breaking up with a girlfriend or boyfriend can cause a lot of emotional pain. Really on that spectrum, a death of a friend or a family member can be very detrimental, or someone just that we love that says something that hurts our feelings, right? All of this is a type of emotional pain. And really with that emotional pain, it's something we can feel, right? We still feel it in our body. It kind of hurts, like a hurting heart or a broken heart. It can feel physical pain. It doesn't necessarily cause physical harm to the body. So we're not going to spend much time in the physical body here. We're going to spend all the time addressing emotional pain. And ultimately what is harmed is our ego and our identity. So that's just kind of who we think we are in a self and who we think we are as an identity. So when someone hurts us emotionally, we can in fact form emotional scar tissue to protect ourselves from being hurt in the future. Again, back to the physical body example, it can give us kind of a toughening, it can give us kind of a protective layer, if you will, to being hurt. Much as the physical response is that way, the emotional healing response is similar. So when our body forms this scar tissue, sorry, I just want to make sure I have this right. So it intends on being helpful, right? That's the healing process. We don't want to re-injure that emotional wound, of course. Yet when it comes to emotional pain, we can't necessarily view it in that simple light. We can't just become over time just like a rock hard robot because we've been hurt emotionally while living our life. Emotional injuries, even though they feel like physical pain, are not that way. What gets cut or injured is our self-image, our ego, and our identity. This is why we're going to take a look at it in this chapter as to how we can cure or heal these emotional wounds as we would physically recover from an injury. So when I was talking a little bit here on the emotional kind of scar tissue and it being so rough that you're like enclosed in a robot, what I'm referring to is the fact that like all people have experienced some kind of inner emotional pain and emotional scars. It's just the price we pay for living our lives, right? If we lived in a box, we wouldn't experience any emotional pain, yet we wouldn't have any rich experiences in life. So when we've gotten hurt emotionally, it can take a while for us to actually heal appropriately. And generally speaking, I've never learned how to do that, right? I'm sure you reading along have never learned how to heal emotionally. There are other mediums out there, but I never really learned that. And so when we're hurt and hurt deep, we don't just want to close ourselves off to life, right? That's the wrong way of looking at this. Now with physical pain, for an example, you put your hand on a burner, you burn your hand, you don't go back and do that. So that's like a very smart and safe play. And in emotional pain, we can maybe use that, like if you get broken up with and for a certain reason, and maybe it's happened twice or three times. Okay, yeah, now we need to learn those triggers and those cues and signals as to, okay, maybe that similar issue is something that I should make myself more aware about. But from a general sense, just because we were hurt by someone, that doesn't mean we close ourselves off to all people in the world, if that makes sense. Yes, we neglect ourselves the ability to live life essentially to the fullest. The emotional wall that we build up as a protective agent gets cut off from the person who hurt us, which is maybe a net positive in some people's minds, but also it can pull us away from people who have not hurt us. So a quote that I have here from one of my favorite rappers, his name is Russ, R-U-S-S. It goes like this, and it's just a very kind of specific piece in his song, one of his songs, and it says, "If you don't heal what hurts you, you will bleed on someone who hasn't cut you." And I just love that so much because it's implying that if you don't A, heal yourself, then you B, will bleed out. So the first part is healing yourself, which is a process, but then to someone who has not cut you. So this is the whole process and why we discuss this in chapter 10, right? Is like, again, we're going to go through life, we're going to get hurt emotionally. That's just a part of the process. But if we're never attending to these wounds, these cuts and things of that nature, we'll go and hurt people who haven't even hurt us. And that happens all the time in life, honestly. You'll hear of one bad experience and say, oh, I'll never do that again, or I'll never do that again. And sometimes that can be true, right? But most of the time, just because we've been hurt by someone, that doesn't necessarily mean that we completely cut that entire thing out of life. Because if you get, really wounded or banged up out there, you can become very cynical and closed off. And that's just, again, not a great way to fully express, our lives. So love that quote. So once we acknowledge that we will be hurt at times and will continue to be hurt, that's just, again, the course, we need to find time to heal. Healing ourselves from that pain. A lot of the time, this is generally where therapy comes in, because you're expressing these pains to a third party, and that expression helps you get that out of your system to relieve yourself of that kind of event or wrongdoing. Journaling is another form of spiritual and emotional release. I've done that before, and it's, if you have something on top of mind that you're just not okay with, you go and write for, let's say, 5 to 7 minutes on it. You kind of take it and then you brush it off and say, okay, that's kind of is what it is. But what we really need to focus on here is we have to mentally process the events that hurt us And the reason we do that is, if we don't ever process what is hurting us, that's kind of the definition of insanity, where it's like if you keep doing the same thing and expecting a different result, that is what ultimately like will continue to hurt you. So we have to know what it is that hurt us, and that can be painful to relive, of course. But once we journal out, once we talk out what it is specifically that hurt us, we can then digest. Okay, is this something we're completely cutting out? Is it just a mistake from another person? Is it just a fault from another person? Or like maybe in the case of a breakup, like do we need to reconstruct our personality? Do we need to find different types of people that we're trying to date? XYZ. So that processing is a huge piece to just becoming aware of a lot of this stuff. We have to become aware first. Then from there, once we've processed it, we can then begin to forgive ourselves if we make the mistake, or other people if they make the mistake. And so that combination of processing and forgiveness is what allows us to move forward in life. So if this is the first time you're hearing this, I would encourage you to kind of take some time, in fact, to process what we're talking about here, to then maybe use this as a way of processing old painful memories or things that have hurt you, to say, hey, I didn't get this business deal, or I tried to start a company with someone and they dropped out on me, or my sister or my brother said something that hurt my feelings. Being able to express that to a therapist on paper, all of that good stuff, can help move you forward in terms of, okay, what is the issues coming on here? Is it a them issue? Is it a me issue? And then being able to move forward with kind of a new direction is very important. So now we're going to get to the actual how-to remove old emotional scars. So as we begin to increase our self-awareness through mental processing and skills, as we develop skills for managing and healing our current and future emotional pains, we can recover more efficiently and effectively. We can then go back to clean out pre-existing or scar tissue from the past. You wouldn't just install a new house on a weak foundation, right? So we want to, again, make sure that we have a means to do things in the future with some of these different practices to heal emotional wounds. But we have to go back into our emotional foundation, which I'll pre-warn you, it's not fun to do, but I think the work of doing that is vitally important. So then that way you can kind of, again, get a grasp on everything of why certain things triggered you. There's a lot of different reasons why things can trigger us, but if we don't ever go there, we'll never know. So to provide some reassurance on how we go about healing and restoring our old emotional pains, we must know that we can be our own medical emotional operator. So over time, as you either go to therapy or journal or talk things out, you are in control of your ability to go and do this, which is very important. I think you don't have to schedule a doctor's appointment to go and fix yourself, right? You are in control. So that's awesome. Essentially, we become our own plastic surgeon. To create a newfound peace of mind and happiness in life, we must conduct mental surgery on emotional pains. Many people try to just apply salve or balm on old emotional wounds, and that just does not work, right? You can't just put a little bit of ointment on it and hope it goes away. If it's a deep emotional pain, we got to go in there, clean it out, understand, clean out the area, and then begin to heal so it can heal with that. So not easy work, but very, very, very important things to do if we're trying to, again, focus on developing our self-image through Psycho-Cybernetics. So forgiveness, the term and the verb forgiveness, is the scalpel we use to remove old emotional scarring. So when we think of forgiveness and like genuine forgiveness, it provides the soothing sensation for ourselves and for those that have hurt us, right? Forgiveness is not a weak point of reference. It's not a weapon. It's not, you're not weak if you use forgiveness. Forgiveness is an incredible tool. So with that, we have to understand like the power of genuine forgiveness. So again, just a quick example, you go out, you say something to your significant other or a parent or whatever, didn't come off right, you hurt their feelings, well, or in reverse, right? Then you have to have the ability again to process what was going on, but then you say, hey, I forgive the pain inflicted on me from you. And that is the beginning of the healing process. Or said another way, if you're apologizing for an action in which you did, the forgiveness from them to you is them saying, in that mutual understanding of, hey, I acknowledge that you hurt me, but I'm forgiving you genuinely for this so we can move forward and we're not going to be doing that again. So that's what we're really talking about here. Now, the first stage in forgiveness itself is we must be willing to actually forgive. Many a time, a lot of people are not even able to willingly forgive or be willing to forgive themselves or others. And that's an issue, right? Because that creates baggage. So if you're someone listening to this and you feel like you do have a lot of baggage or a lot of grudges or whatever the case is, you're not allowing yourself to be willing to go into either forgive yourself, forgive whatever, circumstances happen for what exactly happened. So we have to start with willingness. So when we come from a place of love and understanding, we can begin to move some of the old pain and anger that is associated with that wound. When we're able to be willing to forgive, we're willing to heal, essentially. So that's why there's such power in that willingness, because if we're never even entertaining the thought of ideas, or if we're not even entertaining the thought of forgiveness, then we're always going to carry that, which just creates overall baggage in life. And eventually baggage can add up and make life seem very, very tough. But to go back to the point on love, understanding, living life, forgiveness, it's so important to our future peace and happiness, right? Because if we never come to terms with how things played out, whether we like it or not, right, we're not able to move forward into another version of ourselves, a more developed version of ourselves, right? And so that's what we're really talking about here, is going back through these major things and saying, hey, I know that this did not happen the way I want it to happen. I got hurt by this person. I got hurt by this outcome. And that's just, it is what it is, unfortunately. But if we allow that to dictate the overall course of our life, we're wasting years in the future to live in freedom and creativity and expression. And now that's just even more pain to the poison, because you're wasting opportunities to kind of change your direction, change your destiny, all this other, good stuff. So that's what we're really talking about here. And that's why, to hammer down on willingness just simply says, hey, I'm going to be open to the idea of either forgiving myself, forgiving others, or trying to at least process and move on to these events, so then that way I can become kind of a better version of myself, or get on with life in some other ways. So hopefully that all makes sense, because the people that hurt us genuinely are also humans, right? And they're likely expressing the hurt that they felt on you in that moment because they're hurting. Most all people are hurting or have had some painful experiences in the past. And so if we don't have maturity, we don't have forgiveness. And maturity is forgiveness in the sense of, hey, I know things didn't play out, but I'm mature enough now to know that I can give off genuine forgiveness, or have somebody give me forgiveness to move on, process, and continue on in life. So there are those people out there who do want to cause harm to other people, which is unfortunate, but they're likely, again, in pain themselves. So that is always a caveat here, is there are people out there that do want to see you suffer, and that's unfortunate, right? But for most of the people, we're all seeking to perform well and treat well others in life. And so this is why we must leverage forgiveness as a way of kind of moving the needle on some of this stuff. So in therapeutic forgiveness, what we're doing essentially is we're canceling out the debt of the person who hurt us. And we're not doing this because we're being generous, right? Or we want to provide them a favor or whatever it is. We're canceling out that debt because we're understanding that that's the way forward. If we never cancel the debt, we'll always carry the baggage into the future. And either you're taking the same amount of baggage into the future, or you're continuing to add baggage and still bring it to you in the future. And that just does not allow for a free, creative life, right? We have to go back and amend some of these things to the best of our ability through forgiveness to be able to then move forward with a clean slate and a fresh slate. It'd be very, very critical to living a good life. And then true forgiveness comes only when we are able to see and emotionally accept that mistakes do happen in life, right? That's why I was saying, we've been hurt, we will be hurt, and people make mistakes because we're human. And it's just the cost of living life. It's the human responsibility to right the wrong. So here's an example. So if my spouse or family member says something to me that hurts my feelings, I must first process what they said, right? wow, that didn't feel good what they said, but then I need to try to understand why they're saying these things. Again, they could just be having a bad moment. They could be having a bad day, a bad moment. And if I never process and understand, I'll never know what the intention of that was. And then this is to say that when we process it from there, we can give that genuine forgiveness, saying, I know you hurt me, or I hurt you. I didn't mean to do that, but I did. I will forgive you through putting me in that emotional pain. And then that forgiveness is us releasing that pain and acknowledging, hey, that was the outcome of what happened. If I'm truly sorry and you're giving me genuine forgiveness, likely that won't happen again in the future. There are some, maybe small caveats to that, but that's how the kind of intermingling activity would work in living life, if you will. So now that we've talking about just that as a high arcing theme, right? And just to kind of come back to that's how we're removing emotional scars, is leveraging forgiveness as our scalpel. This doesn't happen overnight, right? You really have to work on wanting to be there, wanting to use that forgiveness. And it's a powerful tool. And that's something that I'm still working on to this day. And a lot of people are, because we can feel victimized at times if things don't go our way. That's just the nature of life, right? If a couple bad things in 18 years come through, we're that is kind of dictating who we are, and we're not able to move on. And that's really unfortunate, especially if you carry all that through, again, the entirety of your life. That the really good, mature, in tune people say, hey, all that kind of happened as it happened. They'll leverage some spirituality and say maybe that was part of God's plan, maybe that's how it was supposed to come. They just basically have a way of saying, okay, I was there, I processed it, now I can move on, and I want to go live more of my life in freedom and peace. And that's what we're really talking about here. So let me grab a drink really quick. This episode is sponsored by Liquid Death. Hopefully one day I can actually be sponsored by them. That'd be awesome. Okay. So this next part is pretty important, and I really, really like it. So as much as we condemn others, right, it's easy to do that for their wrongdoings on us. We must also recognize that we incur emotional wounds from ourselves. And so if you're anything like me, and this is just brutal honesty, I'm super hard on myself. And so a lot of my emotional pain can be just from me inflicting it on me, which sounds crazy, but I know a lot of people go through that. So we can beat ourselves over the head with self-condemnation, with regret, with remorse, with doubting ourselves, with punishing ourselves, and excessive guilt for life events that didn't go our way. So we can be the person that's harming ourselves. And so I'm bringing this to the attention. If you ever feel like you're this way and you're inside your own head, know that you could be harming you. And it's not so much other people. Other people might be triggering these emotional pains, right? But, you could be the one ultimately that is doing it to yourself. So tough to hear, but it is the reality of the situation. So specifically getting into not only acknowledging that, which is important, right? So remorse and regret are pretty big on the slate, because a lot of people have these things, right? So they're attempts to emotionally live in the past. We regret something. We're remorseful over something that happened to us that was tough. So when we live in the past, we inflict emotional pain on ourselves every time we go back, especially to a painful event. Excessive guilt is an attempt to make right of something in the past that we did wrong or thought of as wrong to us. So this is a very powerful emotion, because especially if you felt wronged at times or you regret doing certain things, and it's painful enough, you can constantly relive that every single day. And every time you relive it, essentially you're re-punishing yourself in the moment today. So going back to the forgiveness piece, this is why this is challenging but yet rewarding. If you're able to forgive some of these past regrets and remorses, you're then able to lighten the load on how much you're punishing yourself. Because again, we're all human. We're all trying to make it right. We're all trying to live a good life and treat people well with love and respect. And that's not the reality of the world. And so the way that we can heal ourselves, which again helps others heal themselves, is the core goal of what we're talking about. So just to kind of get back on track here. So emotions, when used correctly and appropriately, help us respond to the present reality. So we're regulating our emotions, or trying to on an everyday basis, to limit the amount of regret and remorse that we have for future life events. So because we can't live in the past, any effort to relive that painful event doesn't really do us much good, right? So part of the work required to heal old wounds is to realize that past is a part of the past and come to terms with it didn't happen the way that we would have liked to happen, right? That's the first thing. This is like a step in and of itself in the right direction, because it's saying, hey, outcome happened, didn't happen like I want it to happen, but I have to be able to move forward in my life without being able to carry that baggage. So like this one, a lot of people kind of go through this in adulthood, but like here's a good personal example. So I think it was my senior year for baseball. We were down one run, and I tried to go first to third on a kind of a crazy play. And I was, again, senior at the time, really wanted to like get to third. That way we had a chance to tie the game. And as I'm coming through, I end up misreading the play, get tagged, I'm out, right? So now we have 2 outs and we put ourselves in a bad position, all because I wanted to take that risk. High risk, high reward. That's how I was as a player. So I could, in theory, go back and relive that event. And I have many times of like, man, what if I would have been safe? What if I stayed at second? What if I just read the play differently? All this other stuff. I can live my current reality thinking about that for years and years and years and years and years. That doesn't change the fact that it's already done, right? The outcome has already been done. So it's almost better to say, hey, that was a part of the journey, or there was a lesson in that, or I can help out in some way that not happening to other people, whatever the case is. But the more forgiveness of self I can have for that, the more I can say, all right, I'm moving on into the future and going and living my life, or getting ready to coach my kids, or whatever the case is. So that's just more of a real life example. So like, if I would have done this, then XYZ, I would have won. If I would have had more perspective, I would not have hurt the person, or they wouldn't have hurt me, or I would have acted this way. These are the things that we constantly relive, or can, that can really chew us up on a day-to-day basis, which is unfortunate. But the way to frame this is a quote by the infamous Jim Rohn, has since passed away, one of my mentors, not personally, but through his books. Great, great, great teacher. His iteration of this is saying, the past is used as a library of experience, not as a prison for your condemnation. And I'll say that one more time because I just love it. The past is used as a library of experiences to use in your present reality to not make those mistakes. It's not meant as a prison for your condemnation for the rest of your life. And I think that's such a powerful quote. So last thing before we get to the next couple pieces here. So we don't need to take an emotional position one way or another when the detour has taken us off course, when we've made those mistakes and when we've gotten off. The most important thing is where we are in this very moment, present direction, present goals. We need to recognize that as errors, as mistakes. And again, it's insanity to continue to hate and condemn yourself for those past failures, because we're really, truly only human. So that was a lot right there, but I really wanted to kind of drive in the fact that if you need to take out a sheet of paper and write out all the things that are, let's say, the major regrets or the major what ifs, go back and relive it, which I know is, again, painful, but you can say, okay, I'm going to forgive myself for this, or I'm going to forgive them for doing this to me, or I'm going to forgive whatever else. All of that stuff you need to get out in the air, so then you can come back with that forgiveness scalpel and say, hey, I truly forgive myself for maybe not being in position, or maybe doing this better in the future, all of that. And the more you work that forgiveness in there, the more you're going to feel better about becoming like, okay, that is what happened, and I can move forward in my life to create more abundance, more money, more love, more satisfaction in the years to come versus living in the past. So it's very powerful. This chapter is very powerful in terms of removing emotional scars. Okay. So we are going to take a look at reframing mistakes, and then I think we'll have 3 things at the end to just kind of use as tips, and then we'll get out of here. So thank you for carrying along with me here. So in terms of thinking of mistakes, it's helpful and realistic to look at them in terms of what we did or did not do, rather than what the mistake made of us as people, right? So when we confuse our behavior with our self, our ego, our identity, our self-identity, we begin to think that we are a mistake as a human versus we made a mistake, okay? So mistakes are actions we make rather than the people, who we are as people. And I'm going to say that one more time just to really break this down, because this is good stuff right here. So mistakes are actions that we make rather than who we are as people. An action is a verb, so a mistake, that is an action we make that didn't produce the outcome we desired, right? It was an action that we tried to do, didn't get the desire that we want. Nouns denote a state of being. So we made a mistake, a negative outcome, action, versus we are a mistake, a noun, a state of being, or who we are. So hopefully that makes sense, but this is an example that I think can break it down. So if I said that I failed, that is a verb, right? Because I did an action and I failed that action. And that refers to the action. And in that action, I get feedback. Now that action feedback allows me to course correct for the future so that I don't fail and I can do that action successfully in the future. However, if I say I am a failure as a state of being or a noun, this refers to referring to an undesired outcome. This may be tied to the identity or ego. So I go out and I play a sport and I failed to act and I made mistakes. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm a terrible person. It just means that I made those mistakes. And now, knowing that I am not a failure as a person, can course correct to get better at not making those mistakes in the future. So that's a really big separation point. And then additionally, it doesn't contribute to a future course correction. That's what we really need to know, is like, you're in present reality, you're not a mistake. It's more that you had made the mistake and then we can move forward and course correct. Another way to kind of process this is if we look at a child that's learning to walk. So as a child learns to walk, if they stumble and fall, we don't go to the child and say, oh, that child's a stumbler, or oh, that child failed to learn to walk because they didn't do it successfully the first time. The child has just simply failed to walk as a verb, an action, which then encourages them to learn from that and then try again. So hopefully that really kind of internalizes the point of, like, a lot of the time we're doing actions as mistakes and we're not mistakes as people. So that is something that gave me a lot of peace of mind as I've kind of processed this chapter. The attitude or judgment may get across that the child may learn to fixate long-term on being a stumbler or a failure. Again, that's why as we're drilling this in, we want to separate the two so we don't think that we are a failure. We just failed at a specific thing, which is okay. Excellent. So to end this specific chapter, 3 ways to immunize 3 ways to immunize yourself against emotional hurt. Okay. And then we will get wrapped up here. Just want to scroll up to make sure that I got everything, but I think I did. Okay. And then I know I had said this earlier, but so the goal of every human being is to be a self-fulfilled person. People want to be liked, accepted, and resourceful. And so when we heal ourselves emotionally, we gain a higher degree of self-acceptance, which then leads to us being more of the oneness of who we are and can better help people. Emotional scarring and pain prevents creative living. So ultimately, we want to get to a place of positive emotions, creative living. And this is the relevance of going through this, is saying, hey, we're going to scalpel out all this old shit. We're going to take forgiveness in there as well too. We're going to alleviate and soothe some of that so we can heal. And that leads to more self-acceptance, which leads to self-fulfilling prophecies of who we are supposed to be. Okay, so 3 ways to immunize yourself against emotional pains. So just to end on this, a lot of people in today's world are probably overly offended, overly sensitive, and thin-skinned. So if you're someone that gets offended easily by other people's comments and stuff like this, you probably have low self-esteem, which may be tough to hear, but I'm at least stepping up to let you know this, right? So if we have low self-esteem, we will get hurt by others, and that's not necessarily their fault, right? It may be our fault for being that easily offendable. And so we need to generate a form of emotional toughness, emotional agility, and say, hey, we're mentally tough, we're emotionally tough. We're going to create this layer around us that says, okay, I'm doing the work, right? I'm doing the work of healing. I'm doing the work of self-acceptance, and people might say shit about us that re-offends some of those things, but we're saying, you know what? We're working on it. We're confident in working on it, and we're becoming a more well-rounded, full person. So the first one is and I've been kind of touching on it a little bit. So we just need a degree of emotional toughness and ego security to protect us from real fancied ego threats. So people just talking shit or whatever, haters, all that stuff. We have to have a toughness to us and a security in who we are and a self-esteem of who we are to say, hey, we're not going to let that stuff bother us. That's petty stuff, right? I have a note written down here that says self-esteem is as necessary to the spirit as food is to the body. So really just going back to the drawing board saying, hey, we're building our esteem, we're building our confidence, we're working on self-acceptance and healing. And so that creates that kind of ego security for us. Number 2, we must build a self-reliant attitude. The person who has a little to no self-reliance, basically they're emotionally dependent on others. And that's not a good place to be, because if you're emotionally dependent on other people, that's when you're most vulnerable to emotional attacks. So every human being, they do want to be loved and have affection, which is great, but there has to be a degree of self-reliance to say, hey, I am creative, I feel good about myself, I want to give love instead of needing love all the time. And passive dependent people turn to others for receiving some of these things. So we got to be a little bit of self-reliant out there. We not only have to have that emotional toughness and ego security, but we got to say, you know what, if things don't go our way, we're going to be self-reliant. And then lastly, this one kind of humanizes everything. Understanding everyone has bad moments and bad days, right? Most of the time, from the people that we love and care about and from others, they don't mean to hurt us. And if they do, they're probably just in a bad day or a bad moment, or they're insecure and they're trying to take us down with them. We have to accept that, right? That's never going to change as we live the course of our life. But as we mature, as we develop skills, as we get more awareness, and as we continue to heal ourselves and become the best version of ourselves, we can easily handle those situations moving forward. So, quick to hold people accountable, provide some grace to ourselves and others, a lot to ourselves, and they may be going through something at that time. So, Chapter 10, How to Heal Emotional Wounds and Give Yourself a Spiritual Facelift. Hope you guys truly enjoyed the video. I love this one. Went into a lot of detail. Spend some time here if you need to, but let's all give ourselves some form of forgiveness and healing, and know that we're all, as a society, in it for the greater good, for trying to make the world a better place. So take that for what it will, or for what you will, and we will continue to go on to the next chapter, Chapter 11. Thanks, guys and gals.